It was almost midnight when Renata dialed the number for the third time. Her hands trembled, not from cold, although the wind blew in through the crack in the window that never closed properly. They trembled with contained anger, the kind of anger that arises when dignity is crushed so many times that you no longer know if what remains in your chest is pride or just the stubbornness to keep breathing. In her lap, her daughter slept with her mouth slightly open, her curls stuck to her forehead with the sweat from a fever that had already lasted 2 days. Renata didn't have money for medicine. She didn't have money for almost anything. The rent was 3 months overdue, and the refrigerator held only a tub of margarine and half a liter of milk that she reserved exclusively for Melissa. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. She knew the number by heart. He had called so many times in the last few months that the digits were etched into her fingers like scars. Always the same sequence, always the same result. Either he didn't answer, or he answered and hung up when he heard her voice. Carlos, Melissa's father, had disappeared like men who promised the world while needing someone to warm their bed, and then vanish, as if none of those nights ever existed. He had a new life now, a new girlfriend, a job in another city. And the alimony the judge ordered never came. Not a single cent, not even a message asking if his daughter was alive. Renata took a deep breath and dialed again. This time, someone answered on the second ring. Hello? The voice was deep, measured, with a calmness that didn't suit the time of day. It wasn't Carlos's voice. Renata knew this from the first second, but anger was stronger than reason. I'm calling for the last time, she said, her voice faltering between a whisper and a shout. Do you think you can just disappear? That you can pretend your daughter doesn't exist? She's sick, Carlos. Sick. And I don't even have money to buy fever reducers. You owe me 6 months of child support. 6 months. And I swear, if you hang up the phone again, I'll come over there even if I have to walk. On the other end, there was a long silence. Not the silence of someone who had hung up, but the silence of someone listening with their whole body. Miss, the voice said slowly, I'm not Carlos. Renata felt her face burn. The ground seemed to open up beneath her feet. She looked at her cell phone screen, her eyes blurry, and realized she had entered a digit wrong. A single number was transposed. And all that pain, all that shame, all that involuntary confession had been poured into the ears of a complete stranger. Sorry, he murmured, already pulling the phone away from his face. Sorry, wrong number. Wait. The word came firmly, but without haste. Like someone reaching out to catch a person who was about to fall, doing so without alarm, without theatrics, simply with the right presence at the right moment. You said your daughter is sick? Renata fell silent. She wanted to hang up. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the ground to swallow her up along with that call that night and that whole life that seemed to have been stitched together with weak thread. I dialed the wrong number, he repeated. Sorry for the inconvenience. I heard what you said, he replied, and there was something in his voice that Renata couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity, it wasn't curiosity. It was something rarer, something she hadn't heard in so long she almost didn't recognize it. It was attention. I'm not Carlos, but I can help. Renata almost laughed. Almost. Because life had taught her that no one helps without wanting something in return. The neighbors didn't help, the family didn't help, her daughter's own father didn't help, and now a stranger, in the middle of the night, wanted to help. I don't need charity, she said, even though she did. Even though every cell in her body screamed that yes, she did need it, that she was exhausted from carrying it all alone. It's not charity, he said. It's the least I can do. His name was Henrique. She found this out later when he texted her asking for the address of the nearest pharmacy. Renata didn't reply. She stared at the screen, her heart racing, with the suspicion of someone who had been deceived too many times before. But at 2 a.m, the intercom rang, and when she went down the stairs of the building with Melissa in her arms, she found a bag hanging on the gate. Inside were children's fever reducer, saline solution, cough syrup, a carton of milk, biscuits, fruit, and a handwritten note in small, slanted handwriting. Get well soon to your daughter. If you need anything, just call the wrong number again. Renata stood there, barefoot on the cold cement, staring at the note as if it were something that shouldn't exist. She climbed the stairs slowly. She gave Melissa her medicine. She sat on the kitchen floor and cried. Not from sadness. Not exactly from relief. She cried because someone, for the first time in a long time, had done something for her without asking for anything in return, and that hurt in a different way. It hurt like it hurts when an atrophied muscle is forced to move again. She didn't call the next day, or the day after that. It took almost a week for her to send a simple message. The fever's gone, thank you. He replied with a sun emoji and nothing more. And for some reason, that yellow sun on a cracked screen seemed like the warmest thing Renata had received in years. The messages started slowly. Renata asked what he did for a living. He said he worked in investments. She didn't quite understand what that meant, but she understood that he woke up early, read a lot, and lived alone in an apartment that was too big for one person. He never mentioned money. He never flaunted anything. He talked about books he was reading, about a cafe he discovered near the office, about a song he heard in traffic that stayed in his head all day. Renata replied, between shifts at the beauty salon where she worked washing hair for a salary that barely covered transportation. She never told anyone about Henrique, not because it was a secret, but because I wouldn't know how to explain it. What was he? He wasn't a friend, he wasn't a boyfriend, and he wasn't a benefactor. He was someone who, for no apparent reason, had decided to be there. And being there, Renata gradually learned, was the most difficult thing one person can offer another. Henrique asked to meet Melissa. Renata said no. She said it firmly, with that motherly voice that had learned to build walls around her daughter because the world had already shown its teeth too many times. He didn't insist. He wasn't offended. He simply sent a message that said, "When you're ready, if you are, I'll be here." That phrase stayed in Renata's head for days. She repeated it mentally while shampooing her client's hair, while warming Melissa's bottle, while looking out the window of the crowded bus on her way home. I'll be here. So simple, so impossible, because no one was ever there. Not her mother, who left when she was 15. Not her father, who drank until he forgot he had a daughter. Not Carlos, who swore eternal love with the same mouth that later said he never wanted that child. Renata was 26 years old, but her body carried the weight of someone who had lived twice as long. She had permanent dark circles under her eyes, hands parched with chemicals, and a way of walking that seemed to apologize for taking up space. She didn't think she was beautiful. He didn't think he was interesting. She didn't think she was worthy of being chosen. And perhaps that was exactly why Henrique's silent presence frightened her so much. Because he didn't want anything. Because he simply appeared, like rain after summer that's too long, without asking permission, without warning, without expecting applause. 2 months after the wrong number, they met for the first time. Renata chose a public park during the day, with Melissa in her stroller. She arrived half an hour early out of sheer nervousness and sat on a bench biting her nails until they bled. When she saw Henrique approaching, she felt a strange thing in her stomach. He was tall, wore glasses, and had a somewhat awkward way of walking, as if his body were too big for the movements he wanted to make. He didn't look like a millionaire. He didn't look anything like what she had imagined. He just looked like someone who smiled with his eyes before smiling with his mouth. He crouched down in front of the stroller and looked at Melissa with a gentleness Renata had never seen in a man. He didn't touch the girl. He didn't force intimacy. He just stood there at her eye level and said, "Hi, Melissa, I'm Henrique. Your mother is very brave, you know?" Melissa, with her 2.5 years of innocent wisdom, reached out her little hand and grasped his finger, and Henrique stayed there, his finger trapped in that small hand, as if he didn't want to be anywhere else in the world. Renata didn't cry at that moment. She saved her tears for later, for the night, when she laid Melissa on the mattress and stared at the ceiling in the dark. She cried softly with her hand over her mouth, because she recognized in Henrique's gesture something she had longed for since she was a child and never had. Someone who lowers himself to be on the same level. Someone who doesn't need to be big to be present. The meetings repeated themselves, in the park, in a simple diner, in a square near the salon where she worked. Henrique never took her to expensive places. He never tried to impress her with what he had. He would bring coffee, a biscuit for Melissa, a book he thought she would like. They talked about small things that, little by little, became immense. Renata told him about her mother who left, about her father who drank, about Carlos and the promises that turned to dust, about the constant fear of not being enough for his own daughter, and Henrique listened. He listened with his whole body, his eyes fixed on her, without interrupting, without trying to fix things, without offering solutions that no one asked for. He just listened. And sometimes, when she finished speaking and silence fell between them like a soft cloth, he would simply say, "You're stronger than you imagine." Renata didn't believe it, but she liked hearing about it. It was on an ordinary Tuesday, with nothing special on the calendar, that Henrique showed up at the salon at the end of the workday. Renata was sweeping the floor, her apron stained and her hair tied up in a crooked bun. He came in and stood in the doorway, and she felt ashamed. Ashamed of her apron, the dirty floor, her rough hands, the smell of chemicals that permeated her clothes. Ashamed of being seen like that, in that setting that was her real life, unfiltered, unprepared. But Henrique looked at her as if he were looking at the only thing that mattered on that entire street. And he said, without embellishment, "I came because I couldn't wait until Saturday." Renata dropped the broom. She stood there, in the middle of the empty hall, her heart pounding so hard it seemed the whole building could hear it. And for the first time in her life, she didn't apologize for existing. She didn't fix her hair. She didn't hide her hands. She stood there, exactly as she was, and let him see her. They didn't kiss that day. They didn't need to. What happened there was bigger than a kiss. It was a choice. He chose her there, on that dirty floor, in that stained apron, in that imperfect life, and she, for the first time, allowed herself to be chosen. The following weeks were like a song that gradually takes shape. Henrique told Renata about his life, about his father who built an empire and died without ever saying he loved him, about his mother who lived in nursing homes and no longer recognized her own face in the mirror, about the oversized apartment, about the business dinners where everyone smiled without feeling, about the specific loneliness of someone who has everything and no one. He didn't use his own pain to compete with hers. He only showed that wounds exist on every floor, that silence weighs equally in a penthouse and in a studio apartment. One night, Carlos called. Not Renata, but Henrique. Someone, a mutual acquaintance, had told him that his ex was dating a rich man. Carlos called drunk, cursing, saying that Renata was a gold digger, that she always wanted someone with money, that he always knew she was no good. Henrique listened to everything in silence. When Carlos finished, he said only one sentence with the same calm as the first call. "The only thing you need to know is that your daughter is being taken care of. Good night." And he hung up. When Renata found out about the call, she wanted to disappear. The shame returned with force. That old shame that told her she didn't deserve anything good, that everything she touched was ruined, that Henrique would realize who she really was and leave like all the others. She distanced herself. She stopped answering messages. She let the calls ring until they dropped. She made up excuses. She built a wall with the same speed with which she had allowed it to be torn down. Henrique didn't insist with words. He didn't send long messages, didn't make demands, didn't ask for explanations. He did something different. Every morning, for 12 consecutive days, a bag appeared hanging on Renata's gate. Inside, always the same things: milk, fruit, biscuits for Melissa, and a note. Each note had only one sentence. Day 1, I'm not leaving. Day 2, you don't need to be perfect. Day 3, Melissa showed me a drawing on video. It was me, her, and you. All three of us had wings. Day 4, the coffee at that diner isn't the same without you. Day 5, I know what it's like to be afraid. I'm afraid too. Day 6, your strength is not a burden. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Day 7, I don't want to save you. I want to walk beside you. Day 8, Melissa asked about me today. Her neighbor told me. Day 9, I'm here. Day 10, I am here. Day 11, I am here. Day 12, I'll be at the park tomorrow at 4. If you don't come, I understand, but I'll be there. Renata read the last note sitting on the kitchen floor in the same spot where she had cried the first night. Melissa played beside her, stacking plastic containers with the absolute concentration that only very young children possess. Renata looked at her daughter and thought of all the times someone promised to stay and then left. She thought of her mother, her father, Carlos. She thought of how abandonment teaches the body to reject presence before presence has a chance to reject you. She thought of how it's easier to say no than to risk hearing no. But then he looked at the notes, all 12 of them, scattered on the table like petals of something that insisted on blooming despite the concrete. And he understood a simple thing that was perhaps the most difficult thing he had ever understood in his life. Accepting being loved is also an act of courage. The next day, at 4 in the afternoon, Renata appeared in the park. Melissa was in her stroller wearing a flowery dress that Renata had bought with the money from the entire month's tips. Henrique was sitting on his usual bench with 2 cups of coffee and a bag of biscuits. When he saw Renata approaching, he didn't jump up. He didn't run to her. He just smiled, in that way of his that started in his eyes and lingered on his lips, as if joy needed to be felt inside first before it could show on the outside. Renata sat beside him. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face and the weight of all the things that didn't need to be said because they had already been written one by one on notes hanging on a gate railing. Then Melissa stretched out her little arms to Henrique and said, with the imperfect clarity of a 2.5-year-old, "Hold on. Lap." Henrique looked at Renata, asking for permission. She nodded, her eyes filled with tears that this time she didn't try to hide. He picked Melissa up, and the girl rested her head on his shoulder as if that shoulder had been made for that head, as if the whole world had conspired, so that a wrong number with 1 digit wrong would connect 3 people who desperately needed each other. Renata rested her head on Henrique's other shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His arm wrapped around both of them, mother and daughter, with the naturalness of someone who has finally found a reason to have arms. They stayed there until the sun went down and the park emptied out. 3 people on a bench, in silence, watching the sky change color as one watches one's own life change direction. No hurry, no grand promises, no eternal vows. just the small, unwavering truth of those who chose to stay. That night, Renata put Melissa to bed and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at her daughter. She thought about everything she had been through. She thought about the poverty, the abandonment, the humiliation of calling a man who didn't care if his own daughter was alive. She thought about the shame of dialing the wrong number. And she thought about how, sometimes, life's greatest successes are born from the most improbable mistakes. She picked up her cell phone and texted Henrique. Just 3 words. "Thank you for your attention." He responded with 4. "Thank you for calling." And there, in that small apartment, with the window that wouldn't close properly and the refrigerator that was no longer empty, Renata smiled. Not the wide smile of someone who is happy, but the quiet smile of someone who finally, after a long time, feels that she belongs somewhere, that someone sees her, that someone stayed. Outside, the wind continued to enter through the crack in the window, but now, for the first time, it didn't bring cold. It carried the smell of coffee, biscuits, and handwritten notes. It carried the scent of a future she had finally allowed herself to have.